Hello and welcome to Bluenotes, located on the best city on the Mississippi, the best in the Midwest. We've got that Stanley Cup power, too sweet to be sour. And if you're still clueless, we're talking about St. Louis. This is your home for Blues coverage on the Hockey Podcast Network. I'm your host, Tom Franklin Wags, enjoying the holiday break. And we have a special presentation for you for this episode of Bluenotes. Hope you're having a very good holidays. Hope your Christmas was merry and bright, and you still got the chance to hang out with your family, maybe via Zoom or Google Hangouts or remotely. Even if you went ahead and had a small gathering in person, all that's reasonable. Hopefully no one got sick, and hopefully everyone had a good time, because it's 2020. This is our last episode of 2020, and we need some good times in our lives. No Thursday episode, but again, and I'm unless there's more breaking news like we did this past Thursday. So don't count on a Thursday episode, but who knows? Maybe I'll surprise you once again if something happens. But in the meantime, coming up here on Bluenotes after we promote our newest Hockey Podcast Network podcast, or one of them anyway. We will have a 90-minute conversation between Guy and myself with Fox Sports Midwest Scott Warmann right here on Bluenotes.
Did you know that your favorite band also loves your favorite hockey team? If you love hockey and you love music, you're going to love Bar Down Breakdown, a podcast that explores the crossover between alternative music and the sport we love, hockey.
Every NHL player wants to be in a band, and every band guy wants to be a pro athlete.
With guests from all over the globe, come along with us as we interview some of the most captivating names in alternative music and talk about why we love hockey and how it's influenced us.
There was for a few seconds I thought well, maybe we should wear Montreal jerseys, and the NHL was like, I think you should stay neutral. And we're like, yeah, you know what, you're probably right.
So tune in every Tuesday on the Hockey Podcast Network, where we'll have a brand new guest and a unique look into the bridge between hockey and music.
It's the Bluenotes Face-Off of the Week.
I would like everyone out there in Hawaii Blues Fan Nation and Bluenotes podcast. You guys, I love you, but we got to give a great big thank you and welcome to Fox Sports Midwest pregame, postgame, and in-game host Scott Warmann. Scott, thank
you. Wow. That's the biggest ovation I've ever got in my life. Thank you, guys.
That's not true. That's not true. I've heard 18,000 people applaud
they're throwing
you.
Stuff at me. Over at the arena. They're throwing stuff at me. They throw stuff at Bernie, but they want Bernie to sign stuff all the time, which he always does. One of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet in your life, man. Unbelievable.
Oh, well, we'll get there, Scott. First, I got to do this. I would like to know where you're from and how you got interested in sports media, journalism. What brought you to this place?
Well, brought me to the place was because, like a lot of us guys, no pun intended, I was just a big sports fan. I played sports my whole life. I was lucky enough as a kid growing up here, born and raised in St. Louis, that my family always had season tickets to Cardinal football games, Cardinal baseball games, and Blues hockey games. And we didn't miss too many. I mean, I was constantly going to sporting events. I played sports at a very, very early age. My mom put skates on me and tried to get me to skate because she knew how much I loved hockey, and I was already playing baseball. And I couldn't skate. My ankles just gave out on me every time. And it was really I was just completely sad that I couldn't play. I played floor hockey when I was going to grade school up in North St. Louis County. And I could play the game on the floor, but I couldn't skate. But play baseball, soccer, and then because my parents wouldn't let me play football until I got into high school over at Luther North High School. In fact, a guy that was a grade ahead of me will be officially inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame coming up hopefully this August. And Steve Atwater, the former safety from the Denver Broncos, who was a great dude, awesome guy. And so, yeah, just always played sports, went to the University of Missouri for a couple of years and was actually a business major, came back home and finally convinced myself, watching sports, listening to sports, going to sports events, that why not try this, and, as I, along with countless number of people will tell you, one of the primary reasons you went into this business, especially if you're from the Midwest and from St. Louis, was because of Jack Buck and Bob Costas. And when you got to actually go behind a mic or, a television camera, they make it look so easy, and it's not. And so I went to Lindenwood University and I learned my craft. And then from there went to KMOX radio for a couple of years and was actually in news. And then left there and went to a myriad of places, radio stations, all sports radio stations. And then eventually worked on Rams radio. My first year in 1999 was the year the Rams won the Super Bowl, was part of that broadcast. All sports stations, went back to Rams radio until they moved to 101 ESPN. And then was basically, other than working for the Missouri Valley Conference, which is located here in St. Louis, doing play-by-play for their football and basketball telecasts, I didn't have anything until I got a phone call and a message from Tom Ackerman, the sports director over at KMOX, Chris Kerber, my very good friend, the voice of the Blues, and Steve Moore, the program director. And they asked me if I wanted to kind of fill in part-time, especially on the weekends when the Blues had games, because Kevin Wheeler was working Monday through Fridays and they needed somebody specifically for Saturdays to help them out on Saturdays. And then that built up when the Cardinals became a part of KMOX once again. They had a second sports show. So it was myself, Chris Kerber, Dan McLaughlin, the longtime TV voice of the Cardinals, and Mike Claiborne. We had the second show called the Sports Hub. And from there was doing weekends on pre and post game for the Cardinals and the Blues. And there was a guy by the name of Kevin Landy. He was the executive producer at Fox Sports Midwest. And he's now head of the programming for the USGA, the United States Golf Association. So now that's not on Fox, it's on NBC. All that is the overseeing part of it is from Kevin. Kevin moved back to the East Coast because he's originally from New Jersey. But Kevin saw me do some sidelines for one of the high school football telecasts we had on Fox. And he's like, look, I want to give you a shot. And it was 2012 and the Blues were playing their last regular season game before they got in the playoffs. And they needed some help because the Cardinals were overlapping with the Blues, and Pat Paris, who was the main anchor at the time, along with Jim Hayes, were covering the Cardinals. And they said, we want you to try this out. And luckily, because of my radio side of things, I had not only a background with hockey, but most of the hockey people never had actually worked with Darren Payne before. And so did the pregame, did the postgame show. And Chris Kerber called me the next morning. He goes, congratulations. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, dude, I got a call from Panger after your postgame show last night. I said, okay. I said, was he happy? He goes, he was blown away. He goes, he cannot believe that you've never done that before. He says he had worked with people in North America, both Canada and America before, that didn't, on a national basis, that hadn't done as well as I had done in my first go around with him. I was like, wow, that made me feel really good. And the bosses were happy with me. So I just started filling in over at Fox Sports Midwest whenever, especially during hockey, but even every once in a while during baseball, when Pat specifically had some time off or what have you. And then Pat decided to go back into news and go back to his hometown in Tucson, Arizona. And they said, are you interested in this job? I'm like, are you kidding me? I grew up rooting for the Cardinals and the Blues. I'm like, yes, I'll do whatever it takes to get a job like this. And as you learn and you're in this business or anything we are in life, you go through some of the tough times. I've been through a lot of tough times before, and you learn from that. But timing is also a big part of it. And the other thing I always stress to people, and I hate elaborating so much on myself, but is hard work pays off. And you can ask anybody in the industry, people probably don't even like me, but they know that I work my butt off. I always have. I kept my nose to the ground. I've worked my butt off, and I've always respected who I work with. And I've gotten this break, and I'm always forever, however long it lasts, forever grateful to have this opportunity to be the studio host for the Cardinals and the Blues. And hopefully I can do this until I retire. And there's no doubt about it. I've been a part of, like I mentioned, Super Bowl broadcast. 2011, first year the Cardinals were on KMOX. I actually was a part of a Cardinal baseball World Series broadcast. And of course, as we all know, 2019, part of a Stanley Cup broadcast as well. So I'm pretty proud to say that I've been a part of 3 World Championship broadcasts for our teams here in St. Louis. And again, blessed as well. There's no doubt about it, but it's been quite a ride. There's no doubt about it. Things have changed in 30 years. Trust me, they've changed a whole lot, guy.
I feel like going like this. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
Stop. Not at all. Tom's more ahead of me by now already anyway. So
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm kind of, I guess I want to do the opposite of, what Pat did. And that is, maybe get into sports someday. I work in news right now, and, it's great being a part of, KMOX, as you were with before. I mean, as you know, Tom Ackerman's a great guy to work
Absolutely.
with. And, he had me along for the All-Star Game media day, so I got to, meet some players, and that was just a real rush. Growing up here in St.
But
Louis.
Tom, I'll tell you this. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll tell you this though. I learned so much, and I've even mentioned this on the recent, sadly, passing of Bob Hamilton.
Yeah.
Bob Hamilton taught me a lot when I was in the newsroom. He taught me how to report. He taught me how to report and write and put together stories. And I will always take, even though I wanted to be in sports, I will take those 2 years in news. And it really did advance me in what I did. So don't, just throw that away like it's, it's just
definitely
news. No, you're learning something. Plus the people that you get to meet, like a Tom Ackerman, Kevin Wheeler, and whoever else is over there as well, Mike Claiborne, just from a sports standpoint alone, not to mention all the great news people over there. Because, you see the awards up on the wall. I can honestly say that I work with some Hall of Fame people, and I can, like a Bob Hamilton, but I can go right on down the line, and I can, no matter how long ago that was, I can always put that and say, not only is a memory, but a great opportunity that I had to work at one of the great radio stations ever in our country.
Yeah, and that's a big thing for broadcasters, even if they find themselves, I guess, in a less than ideal situation. I'm not saying mine is not. I'm grateful to be at KMOX.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is there. There's always learning experiences all around you. I mean, if you just by watching someone like a Tom Ackerman work, or like someone, I wish I could have met Bob Hamilton. I got there, long after he retired. But I grew up listening to that voice, after Cards games. Oh, the Cardinals win 3-2, and and I'd be like rounding the corner where the Eat Right was. Rest in peace, Eat Right. It's boarded up now, but it's all experience, and that's a big thing for broadcasters, is to keep their eyes open, keep their ears open, and always be learning. Always be soaking everything up. So growing up in St. Louis, obviously, you mentioned you're a St. Louis sports fan, Cardinals, Blues, all that. You have been around long enough to remember the St. Louis arena, obviously. And, I have some fleeting memories of the arena. I'm in my mid 30s, and I went to a few games there, but I don't have a lot of memories there. What are some of your favorite Blues memories from the old barn?
We got all day. A lot. Brother, I can go back to the early 70s. As I tell some, I go back before Bernie was actually playing for the Blues.
Wow.
I remember the Plager brothers, Bobby and Barkley. I remember Bobby Gassoff beating the snot out of a lot of players. And my mom's actually in town here. She's staying with me because she doesn't live here in St. Louis, and she was just as much of a hockey fan as I was. And she'll tell you, there was many nights on a Saturday night at the old barn where if there wasn't sticks and gloves and blood and teeth on the ice at some portion on a Saturday night game with the Blues, it wasn't a Saturday night. That's just the way the boys played back in the day, and they were rough, tough, and you just couldn't mess around. Bobby Gassoff was probably somewhat one of my first memories. Red Berenson, Gary Unger. Then when Bernie and Sudsy, Brian Sutter came in, and Mike Liut, who maybe to this day, with all due respect to Jordan Bennington, maybe Curtis Joseph, is probably still the greatest Blues goaltender of all time. Liut was amazing. He was absolutely incredible.
Doesn't get enough respect, by the way.
Yeah, it's overlooked because it's such a long period of time. But I mean, Liut was just. I remember there was a game. The Blues were playing the Penguins, and it was the early 80s, and it wasn't the 80-81 team, because that was one of the best teams the Blues have ever had. And Bernie would even tell you that as well. But it was Greg Millen versus Mike Liut. Oh, how ironic, because they wound up getting eventually traded for each other when Harry Arness took over, and of course depleted all the good players. Joey Mullen was traded to the Calgary Flames, go right on up and down the line. But there was a double overtime game between Millen and Liut, between the Blues and the Penguins back in the early 80s. It was one of the all-time classic games. I was reading Jeremy Rutherford's article this morning about Ryan O'Reilly, becoming the captain. And I looked at the list of captains, and the longest standing captain out of all the great captains the Blues have had in their history was Brian Sutter. And everybody, and Bernie will tell you, you learned the sweater never goes on the locker room floor. Well, that was started by Barclay Plager. And Barclay is still a guy, even sadly, so many years that he has passed, that Bernie still looks up to. And I know so many, but Barclay was another former captain, then eventual coach with the Blues organization. But Barclay is one of those guys that you did anything for that crest on your jersey, and it still spills over. But the longest tenured captain was actually Brian Sutter, and Brian kind of carried that over what Barclay actually started as captain of the Blues. And I'll never forget, there was a weeknight game, and I was with a buddy of mine I was in grade school with, and his dad, who was a police officer in the city. And the Blues are playing the New York Islanders, and the Blues are getting smoked. Again, this is the early 80s. And Brian gets in a fight with his brother, Brett, and beats the living crap out of him.
Brotherly love.
Awesome. But that told you the pride that he had. Hey, this is my blood, but you know what? This is my blood for 60 minutes during a game. Then I'll probably go hug my brother afterwards, But that just told you the pride that Brian Sutter, Barclay Plager, Bernie Federko, and all these guys had. I was actually in college on the Monday Night Miracle, so I wasn't actually there, but I was actually at an establishment at University of Missouri watching that game. We went crazy. It was awesome. It was an amazing time. But I think maybe the most vivid ones for me, no doubt, was Brett Hall. And I've said this, I know we've had a Stanley Cup championship team, greatest hockey team I think I've ever seen with the Blues, next to a Stanley Cup championship team, because they did win it, was the 90-91 team. That's the 1 year they had Scott Stevens on the blue line with Jeff Brown. Cujo was just starting to come into his own, and Holy and Oates were loading it up. And as I tell a lot of our younger producers that I work with, who really were babies at the time and don't remember, you could turn on SportsCenter on a particular night, and SportsCenter would lead with Brett Hull and Adam Oates. That is the God's honest truth. The older people my age would remember that, but there's younger people that don't realize that they literally would lead SportsCenter. That's how on top of the world Brett Hull and the St. Louis Blues were, and they were battling the President's Cup trophy that year with the Chicago Blackhawks, who were really good with Roenick, Chelios, and what's his name between Belfour. And then they had Boston was really good. In one game, it was in February of 91, and the Blues were taking on Boston, who was one of the top teams in the NHL that year. In fact, they were the best in the Eastern Conference, and the Blues smeared them. It was like 9-2. I mean, and they won every fight. I mean, it was just a shellacking. And we all got done watching the game. We're like, man, this team is something. Then they made the Vancouver trade, which I'm sure is famous or infamous, however you want to put it. And that kind of changed the scope and the dynamic of everything. And I always say that I've actually met Garth Butcher, and Butcher is a great guy and he was needed. But the rest of the trade that they made, getting rid of guys like Momesso, who was working on the line with Adam Oates and Brett Hull, and losing a guy like Courtnall, because the Blues didn't have a lot of speed, they missed that. Cliff Ronning, who was also a part of that deal, was really kind of a power play specialist at the time, because the Blues were really kind of rolling out maybe 2-3 lines, because they had that Bob Basson, Richie Sutter, Dave Lowry line, which was outstanding. And then Ronning was like on the fourth line, but he was really good in the power play. They lost they lost some of the mojo when they made that deal. Again, the Blues needed another defenseman to help out Paul Cavallini with that second pairing. But what the Blues ultimately gave up for, I think it really hurt the team. And talking to guys as time has gone past, that really ultimately kind of, I think, hurt some stuff in the locker room as well. So watching Brett Hull do what he did in the days, even before the Kiel Center / now the Enterprise Center was open up, was something to marvel at. It was just, it was Pujols-esque for some of the younger people that don't know. I mean, it literally was, when you went to the hockey game, you knew Brett Hull was going to do something. There was just no doubt about it. He may score 1 goal or he may score 5. And there was nobody that was going to stop Brett Hull and Adam Oates. It was really a special time.
Yeah, you're pulling at my heartstrings because you're talking about the period when I was in the Gulf War. And I talk about, and Tom, you've heard me talk about this before, going around searching for the news rolls so I could read about Brett Hull. I wrote an article called How Hockey Saved Me, and that's exactly what I talked about. So I'm on board with you 100% there. And you mentioned something that I want to get into, and Tom, I apologize if I take one of your questions. You talked about the Saturday night fights, old time hockey. Well, with the new schedule, we're going to see teams 8 times. I can see this being especially in April and May, the animosity built up, not just in our division, Toronto and Montreal, the Battle of Alberta, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, the Islanders and the Rangers, up and down, Chicago and Detroit. I think this is going to be some really good hockey. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Disagree? Or?
I think it's a great analogy, actually, and I didn't even think about it, but I think you're spot on, guy, because especially I think the animosity that you will have between the Blues and the Colorado Avalanche. I mean, let's face it, Colorado might be a team the Blues are actually chasing. They're that good. And you got Landeskog, among others. I think that will definitely be a series that can get chippy. I think the Vegas one will be a series. Obviously, you've got the Petro situation going on. Yeah, they've got Ryan Reeves. Who's going to step for the Blues? Well, maybe Kyle Clifford's that guy that kind of steps up for the Blues now. That's one of the reasons they got him, to kind of, spruce it up a little bit. I love this situation of playing more teams within your division. Yeah, I understand we're not seeing the Hawks or the Predators or even the Red Wings again for some of us old-time Blues fans. But yes, I think there's still going to be a lot of animosity and quite a race. I agree. I think you could see some interesting scenarios. Let's look at the Calgary Flames. One of my favorite players, and I saw him when he was a little kid growing up here in St. Louis after morning skates with his father, is Chuck E. Cheese, Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, literally one of my favorite players to watch. He's old school. And he can get and stir into your kitchen. Imagine him, obviously, with Edmonton. We all know about that. Yep. Unfortunately, they're not going to play the Kings because him and Doughty just get at each other's throats. But there's going to be more interesting scenarios with Matthew and some of even the other teams that are normally in the East from Canada that will be going after each other. I can't wait to see Matthew. And unfortunately, we're not going to see Matthew go up against the Dallas Stars this year. Remember, he was knocked out of the playoffs by Jamie Benn and company. That would have been an interesting scenario this season. I'm sure he'll remember that for the following season. But yes, I agree. I think we're going to really see some chippiness when you get towards the end of this 56-game schedule.
Well, not only that, but you're going to have Matt going up against his brother Brady 9 or 10 times this season. I mean, you want to talk about brotherly love and bad blood. I mean, those are two guys that are going to, fight for Tkachuk dominance multiple times a season. So you got that. You've got the whole Eastern Division, to me, seems like a one big giant powder keg about to explode, because there is animosity just within those 8 teams built in already. I mean, the Blues, they might have to stir something up with the Sharks and the Kings a little bit. As you said, the rivalry with Colorado is kind of budding, as the years go on. But the East, man, that is just going to be, you want to talk about the old Norris black and blue division. There's going to be black, blue, and maybe some red, in that division. And even with the Blues going out west, I mean, there's storylines there. I mean, Minnesota's going to be along for the ride. They're trying to make some noise this year. Arizona's had the Blues number over the past couple of years, and they're going to be in the Central Division after this coming season as well. So we get to deal with that thorn in our side for a little while. But obviously, when you're talking about the Blues playing out west, it's going to come up in conversation, and that is the possibility of 9 p.m. starts, for games. And a lot of Blues fans here in St. Louis are not happy about that. Now, I understand they might mitigate that a little bit and start those games earlier, especially since the California teams are effectively homeless, to start off the season. Like San Jose is playing in training camp in Arizona. Yeah. So what do you feel? How do you feel about, the possibility of those late starts, or are you not worried at all as a on-air guy?
Personally, I'm a night owl by trade, so it doesn't really bother me. I see where Blues fans, you got to work or you got to go to school, even under these different circumstances that we're all living in. It's a little different. I will tell you this, when the whole story came out, I mean, I can tell you Fox Sports Midwest, nobody had any say-so in what the NHL was going to do with the Blues.
Yeah.
So that's I hope that was put to bed.
Yeah, Wyshynski walked that back.
Yeah. So the other thing is the fact that our PR guy, Jeff Goldman, had told me that it's surprisingly enough, there's not that much of a difference in ratings for a 6 p.m. Central start compared to a 9 or a 9:30 Central start, which really, to be honest, kind of surprised me a little bit. But that, evidently, I mean, he added it all up, and that is the case. I think what you'll see is you have games that are West Coast that will have some effect, but when you look at overall the 56 game schedule, you've got 28 at home.
Yep.
Then you got more Central Division and Mountain Time games where that leads up to another 32. So we're only looking at not that many games. And if you look at Vegas has started a lot of games, especially they've even had Friday afternoon games for whatever reason. And I think it's all also depending on what you have from a fan base. If you can have fans, I think we all know California is not going to have any fans. San Jose is going to be lucky to play if they're even going to play at the Shark Tank.
Yep.
Vegas, I don't know if they can have fans. I don't know what the stipulations are in Nevada, maybe a little bit in Arizona, but nobody hardly shows up for a Coyotes game down in Glendale anyway. So
true.
They might move some times up. I don't think that, especially, let's face it, also, a lot of people are working at home. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying that I don't think it's going to be probably as bad. Is it the optimum for everyone that we have more 9 o'clock games in comparison to where the Blues would be if they were in the Central or the South? No, there's no question about it. Yes, you miss the Blackhawks. And as I've mentioned, you miss the Predators. The Nashville's, I think, rivalry has really built up over the years. And you have the old rivalry with Detroit. Oh, by the way, Columbus used to be in your division. And, Patty Maroon's with Tampa and Joel Quenneville's with Florida. That's appetizing. I get it. Rod Brendamore, if you want to go way back, is, running the show with the Carolina Hurricanes. I think that is from head to toe, a more competitive division from head to toe, from top to bottom, with the exception Chicago, I think is going to be down. Detroit might be a little bit better, but we're top heavy now in the Pacific Division. We got to battle the big boys, the teams that you have to beat if you want to be in the Stanley Cup Finals again this year, and that's Vegas and Colorado. Everybody else, you're right, Tom. Arizona's given us some fits. Sometimes the Kings will give us fits. I think Minnesota is down. They're kind of retooling. Billy Guerin's changing things over there. San Jose kind of the same way. So you really got, for the most part, a 2-3 team race when you're talking about the Blues, Colorado, and Vegas. I do think it's going to be really interesting, and it's not going to be easy. There's no question about it. I think one of the X factors, if I can get ahead of myself here a little bit as far as the Blues are concerned, and we said this last year too, was while the Blues were rolling, to get an addition to a Vladimir Tarasenko was going to be just an added bonus because the Blues were already rolling until we had the stoppage. And obviously we know things didn't turn out the way any of us had imagined once we had the return to play. I think Vladdy is going to be very interesting. How does he respond from the shoulder surgery? I know Doug Armstrong said the other day that everything's a positive, and that's great. How does that ultimately affect Vladimir Tarasenko? Because if Vladdy's still himself, he can be such a difference maker for this hockey team. And I just think that is a complete X factor. Whenever he's ready to come back, hopefully sooner rather than later, would be a huge benefactor for this hockey team. There's no doubt about it. Trying to make another run for a Stanley Cup, because they're literally in this window right now. Still, even with the loss of Petro, who's a loss, there's no question about it. But they're still in this window to potentially win another Stanley Cup championship.
Oh, I'm right where with you. In fact, I want with the Tarasenko issue, even let's say that his shoulder, he doesn't have that same zip on his shot that he did before. That's not the best part of his game in my eyes. I think the most underrated part of his game is his vision. And just like Brett Hull learned, and just like other players have learned as you got older, they started learning how to see that they could see the ice differently, and started passing the puck more, started opening things up, started realizing I'm going to get 2-on-1, somebody else is open. I think Vladdy's already starting to get to that point, and we saw that at the Winter Classic, and we absolutely saw it in Game 7. That pass that he made to Shin, that sealed, in my eyes, sealed the Stanley Cup, was absolutely beautiful. Right?
Absolutely
beautiful.
Yeah.
Now that I just talked
he
about
is a guy that is I don't think gets as much credit for his passing ability like you're talking about. And I think that's something that maybe he adds to the game. The one part of his game I think that a lot of people would like to see Vladdy improve on, especially if, and we put a big if his shot is compromised, because look, the greatest shot I ever saw in my lifetime was Brett Hull. That thing would fly off the stick like nobody's business. And I know Brett has mentioned to me, and I know he's mentioned to other people, that Vladdy's shots 10 times better than his as far as his, personal opinion is concerned. But Vladdy's got to learn to do the one-timer. That's the one thing I think Vladdy has got to learn, because a lot of times he'll tap it, set himself up instead of just winding up. If he works on the one-timer a lot more, whether he has that same velocity or not, I don't know. But I'm telling you, that would be huge for Vladdy Tarasenko to get a one-timer. And then, like you talked about, Guy, with the passing ability as well, people can't just anticipate a shot from Vladdy Tarasenko. So there's so much. The guy, Vladdy's so talented. He's the God-given ability that he has been given. He's something special. When he's on his game, man, there's very few that can beat him still in the National Hockey League if he's healthy.
I absolutely agree with you, but you mentioned something, and I want to talk about it real quick. You mentioned you were part of the 99 Rams, you were part of the 2013 Cardinals, and then the 19 Stanley Cup champion Blues. I still have trouble saying that coming off my lips, right? And I, believe it or not, I've told Thomas, I filmed myself during that game. It's on YouTube, my reaction to watching that game. So yeah. Can you tell us what the difference, or how you see the difference, or the feeling of the city and around you, and from each of those championships? What did you see? What did you feel? What was your, how did they, I think you know where I'm going.
The 99 thing was pretty special, even though we now have different feelings about the Rams and the NFL, or at least I do personally, or I don't even have any feelings for them anymore, what they did to our city. But it was special, because being there a lot with my parents at all those games, and then not have a team, and then finally have a team. And let's face it, the Rams struggled their first few years before they turned things around. It was an amazing time. It really was. And really, you think about back in that time, we had a great football team. We had a really great hockey team. They were President's Trophy champions. In fact, several of those players during that era, during the Quinville era, will tell you that 99 team unfortunately lost, remember, to the San Jose Sharks in the first round. Mark Bergevin throws the puck into the net. That was probably their best team, as far as, a lot of those guys that were part of those teams will tell you. And then you had the Cardinals, you started getting the addition of Edmonds and Pujols as well. But the 99 experience was special. There's no doubt about it. There's nothing you can take away from it. 2011 was also special, because kind of like 2006, it was unsuspecting. It wasn't the Cardinals' best team, but they came from nowhere, and then they just had this magical run. Basically, you go back to the middle of September all the way to the World Championship. Real quick story, and I know Kevin Wheeler, KMOX, will back me up on this, is the fact that I was working at KMOX at the time. It was the Game 6, And we have me, or now them, KMOX, Tom Ackerman, Kevin Wheeler, and myself are doing the pre and post game shows. And they have a booth right behind home plate, behind the green seats. It was right around the 7th inning. And they were parading our window. We couldn't see outside. You just see outside the walkway, and you had to walk past our little booth there, KMOX's little booth, where you do pregame and postgame, to the visitors clubhouse. And so we see all these people, the wives, the people that work for the Rangers, whatever, and their smiles from ear to ear. I mean, they're jovial. Next half inning, they're bringing the champagne to put it into to the locker room, and you're like, man, this really stinks. And of course, this was the famous David Freese game, one of the most incredible game I've ever seen in my life, by far. And I've seen some incredible. I've been lucky enough to see some incredible moments, but that was unbelievable. So Cardinals win, go crazy. We get ready, doing the post game show. I'm with Wheeler, and it's like, I don't know, 10 minutes after the game, and all these people that had smiles from ear to ear who were part of the Rangers, you thought their dog had been run over 150,000 times when you looked at your face. And I swear, Kevin and I look at each other and go, we've got this one in the bag tomorrow night. you just knew it, And so that was obviously a very special time. And to be a part of that with KMOX at the time, be a part of the festivities that following Sunday for the parade was pretty cool. But I will say this, 2019, we were actually doing pre and post game shows for the Stanley Cup Finals on Fox Midwest, myself and Jamie Rivers, and we couldn't do anything actually inside the arena. NHL takes everything over. NBC owns everything inside the arena. So we had a situation where we were actually out on Clark Street outside of the Enterprise Center doing our pre and post game shows. Well, this is before Game 6. Blues are up 3-2. Downtown's going nuts. It is just a sea of blue wherever you go. And everybody's just jacked up. They're motivated. And we had this like 2-hour pregame show or whatever it was. And it was unbelievable. Obviously the Blues lose. People are disappointed, blah, 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 blah. And then you go into Game 7, which was the Wednesday night, June 12th. Never forget it as long as I live. And we were actually at Ballpark Village where our studio is at. And I get there, I guess it's like 3:00 in the afternoon. I actually have video on my phone, the line to try to get to inside a Ballpark Village, and they haven't even opened yet. I do have a picture of Busch Stadium, because you can see Busch Stadium behind our little set. We have windows that you can see across the street. And there's 25,000 people, as we all know, at least at Busch Stadium. And of course, Enterprise Center is packed with 18,500 or whatever. And so it was just, it's hard to explain the moment, even to this day. I even have a picture, because one of the girls that works with us, Kim, our stage manager, we were outside videotaping everything, and I kind of lost it for a minute, because I honestly, as I told you guys before we started recording this, there was part of me that thought maybe the Blues would never win a world championship. The Cardinals, I've seen 3 world championships. They have been incredible from a fan side for me. It's been, I always say Cardinal fans are so blessed, because we are blessed beyond anyone's wild imagination, knowing a lot of people, especially from Kansas City, and how they've struggled, even though they've had a couple of world championships now. St. Louis fans are so spoiled. We really are. And we don't even understand. It's not from us. It's just the great baseball we've been given through so many decades. But the Blues winning, and I lost a little bit, and Jamie was there, Rivers. And then we did our show, and then waited to try to go see the Cup. And I had to go because I had to work Cardinals the next day. But was a part of the broadcast with the Fox affiliate here in St. Louis, Fox 2, and worked with Mandy Murphy and John Brown. And that parade that day was the most incredible day I think I'll ever take in. It was just a sea of blue downtown, especially because we were positioned at the Arch grounds. And it was kind of like this may sound a little corny, it was kind of like a love fest. And it's basically, there was no problems. Nobody was getting out of hand. You just saw people didn't even know each other, and they're hugging each other, and cheering and slamming a beer or whatever. Got done. I had to do baseball that night, and Ballpark Village is a mess. But people are just so happy.
Yeah.
And that night I stayed downtown. Friday night I stayed downtown after I got done with the Cardinal postgame show, and it was packed. And I stayed at the Hilton at the ballpark, is where they put a lot of us up at, because we had to get up early, like 6:00 the next morning, to get ready for our broadcast of the parade. And there was just families downtown, even at like 10:30 when I was walking across the street, of little kids. Everybody's wearing blue stuff. And I told my mom this. I said, this may be one of the greatest weeks I've ever lived in my life. And then to cap it all off on that Saturday, the parade. Tom, I don't know if you were down there or not, but man, that was something I honestly, I will never forget, as long as I didn't even think we'd ever have a parade. And I guess from a personal standpoint, how knowing Bernie, and Bernie is a friend of mine, and seeing going through some of the aches and pains he had, John Kelly, because of his father, and knowing the organization. These people have been with the organization for so many years, and for them to actually enjoy it on top of these diehard Blues fans who go through thick and thin, spend their hard-earned money to back this hockey team through the good times and the bad times. It was just an incredible moment. There's no doubt about it. It was awesome. And guys, I will never forget as long as I live. Never will.
Yeah, and I will never forget, that whole, the finals, even not even just the finals, the whole playoffs that year was just like, I felt like I didn't get any sleep, during that at all.
No,
it was so exciting. I don't get any sleep anyway because of the hours that I keep at work,
Mhm.
So there was a lot of times where I'd have to vampire it and sleep during the day. But you mentioned some great moments in St. Louis sports history, like the '99 Rams was special. Me and my dad had season tickets for that, and I remember how silent the dome was in the conference championship against Tampa Bay when it looked like Tampa was just going to strangle the greatest show on turf, just until it was just lifeless. And then Prohl comes through with the catch that, and just the dome exploding. I've never heard that place that loud, and it'll probably never be that loud ever again, sadly. But yeah, it was that was a great memory. You mentioned Freeze, game 6 with the Cardinals, that was another great moment. To me, and you kind of mentioned that moment kind of being like, hey, we got this, we got them where we want them. For me, that moment with the Blues in the 2019 run was when Maroons scored in double overtime against Dallas, because that was another one of those games. I was there. I had a press pass because my news director wanted to have me get some fan audio after the game, and they sat me in overflow seating in these folding chairs in 325, I think it was. And so, I was, there, for the entire game. I thought Dallas was going to do what Tampa did to the Rams in '99 and just strangle this team into submission. They just, Bishop would not let the Blues crack him at all. And then Thomas clanks it off the
can.
Yeah, he was. He really did. I mean, because their
He
offense
dominated that game.
Yeah, and their offense didn't do jack squat after the first period. So it was just like, it felt to me like all the other Blues disappointments in the past, when
Absolutely. No
another
question.
another second round exit. Here we go under dubious means. It's going to be sad. And then Thomas clanks it off the crossbar. Maroon pokes it in, and Guy mentioned that he has recordings of when the Blues were in the playoffs that year. I wish I had that recording of when Maroon scored, because I did not have a greater sports epiphany in my life than that moment right there, because that was the moment all the cynicism went away as being a Blues fan, and I felt that this team could do it. And
they almost got arrested.
Yes. And then they beat San Jose into submission the next round. And then, I was lucky enough to go to the watch parties because, again, my news director wanted fan audio. And for game 7, I sat up in the KMOX booth. I had a press pass. There was no one else up there. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to have a great story to tell when I'm in my 40s and 50s. I got to see the Blues win the Stanley Cup in game 7 of the Stanley Cup finals from the KMOX booth. It was very lonely.
At Enterprise Center.
At Enterprise Center. Yes. But the last possible game you could call the KMOX booth, because they went to 101, right after that. and Biddington, watching him come up, big in the first period. I mean, that felt just like the Maroon moment for me. It was like you start to believe in this team. Did you, as a Blues fan, as a lifelong Blues fan, ever expect the parade to happen and everything leading up to it? Did you ever expect to see Pietrangelo hoisting the cup in a Blue Note?
Like I said, I have my doubts. I hate to say it, after 50 some odd years of life on this earth, I thought, maybe we are snake bit. In the back of my mind, I always believe that, this is going to happen. And like I said, getting to know some of these guys, the true warriors that were on the ice, along with a lot of Blues fans out there, you always hoped, not only for me personally, but for everybody that's part of Blues Nation. But there's a part of me that was like, man, there's a jinx there. There's something. And you hit the nail on the head, Tom, is the fact that you get that bounce. And it was a bounce. And you feel bad because Ben Bishop is a great guy. I've met him before. His family is terrific.
Chaminade High School.
Absolutely. And he was standing on his head. I mean, he is literally the MVP of that game.
He was.
I mean, Blues were completely dominating that game. When Jamie Benn, if you remember, had a wraparound chance and he blew it, went off the end of his stick, I thought, here we go.
My
Blues
heart was in my
again.
throat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree there. Absolutely.
And that might have been the moment. Said, well, wait a minute. Now, hold on. Normally, under most circumstances, as a Blues fan, that is a goal. We're done. But the other point you made, Tom, and I've said this, and I've watched Game 7 a million times, I think. Probably even watch it again on Christmas just to make me happy even more. Merry Christmas, right? Is the fact that the Blues and what Craig Chief Berube did was the Blues literally, you look at the Winnipeg series, Blues go up 2-0, 2-2, they wore them down. Same could be said for the Dallas Stars. San Jose, worn down. You watch the third period of that hockey game, and I mean Boston's going all out, and rightly so. But even after the shingle, they're still getting after it. They did score a goal, but you could tell they were tired. You look, there were a couple of one-timers by Pasternak, and he completely whiffed them. The Blues wore teams down. Their physical brand, I didn't mean fighting like we've talked about earlier in this conversation and the blood and the teeth on the ice on a Saturday night in the 70s, but they literally physically wore down teams. I'll bring up another point as we, also scope ahead to this 2021 campaign, is the fact that I think one of the X factors of this hockey team this year moving forward, and I think he's really opened some eyes, even the people that I work with who played the game. When they first saw Oscar Sundqvist, they were like, Oscar Sundqvist is a difference maker. Yeah. There's no doubt when Sonny is on his game. Now, he's not going to score you 30, 40 goals, but there's so many aspects of his game from a physical standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, to continue the cycle down low and to wear teams down. Number 70 is a huge, huge benefit to this hockey team. And I think we really started to appreciate it more. You look at last season, even when the Blues were rolling before, again, we had the pause, the Blues kind of hit a stale part a couple of different times. And one of them was when Sonny was actually injured. And then the Sundqvist comes back from injury. You go back and look at it. Blues started winning again. Oscar Sundqvist, I think, is also a huge X factor for the Blues to continue their success coming into the season. There's no question in my mind.
And Guy, I know he's one of the guys that often get mentioned as maybe one of the last people that the Blues protect, in the Seattle draft. They've got to protect Sundqvist, right, Guy?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So I want to talk about the parade first real quick, because I'm sitting here, you guys are talking, I'm going, I can't talk. I love this shit. That parade is probably the only time, that day is the only time the word epic would be an understatement.
It's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now,
one of my buddies was actually watching, and if you recall back to when they actually got on stage, which they were an hour late.
Yeah. Of course.
And they're introducing everyone, and they're, some guys aren't feeling any pain, and others, this, that, and other thing.
Excuse me.
Some of those guys were making sailors blush.
Yeah.
Right. But when Larry Robinson came up and he won his 19,000th Stanley Cup ring, and he kind of made a gesture towards Boston. And I chuckled out loud. Well, one of my buddies texted me and they said, "We just heard you on the air laughing at what Larry Robinson did." I go, "Whoops, I didn't know."
And that's what's amazing is all the stories that everybody has. I've talked to a few Boston fans about, the 2004 when they swept the Cardinals. What's your story? And they've got nothing compared to Blues fans in 19.
Really?
Not even close.
Crazy.
Not even close. But what I wanted to get to, you talked about Sundqvist and you protected him. Sundqvist is probably the one player that most appreciated and was most helped by the O'Reilly trade, because he has become O'Reilly Jr. Now, we've heard recently that O'Reilly reports that he's going to be the captain. He's been the captain since the day of that trade when he tells Armstrong, "Let's go get a cup." He changed the style of the team in my eyes, and I think he'll continue to change it for a long time to come.
I'll semi-quasi disagree with you, and here's why, guys. That I think Petro built himself up with respect. He had big shoes to fill when his buddy David Backes left, and he was given that type of honor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Alex would even admit that he had to grow into it a little bit. But I think because you're kind of the conduit basically between the coach, the coaching staff, even sometimes management, and the players. I think he really started to fill the bill. I think what ROR does is the fact that when he came in, his work ethic, as I think what you're alluding to, was a huge benefit, not only I think for an Oscar Sundqvist. I think Robert Thomas has benefited. I think David Perron will tell you that he has benefited greatly working with a guy like Ryan O'Reilly. So from that aspect, yes, but I'm not going to degrade Alex and what he did as a captain, because I think even Ryan O'Reilly respected Alex wearing the C, but I think it's a very smooth transition because of the thing that has been built up, the respect factor, if you will, for a guy like Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan O'Reilly, and now with Alex Steen gone, because Alex probably was a bigger voice than anybody in that locker room. Ryan O'Reilly and probably Braden Shin are you two big leaders probably in that locker room right now. And to me, no two better guys that you could ask for in Braden Shin and Ryan O'Reilly. I think those two guys are such a huge part of this team, not only on the ice and what they do for this hockey team on the ice, but I think off the ice, it really benefits, especially a lot of the young guys. And that's the beauty of watching practice when you get a chance to. And I don't even know if we'll get a chance to do it again this year with everything that's going on. But I mean, ROR and Perron are two of the first two guys out on the ice. And then they're one of the last two to leave the ice as well. And they're always working with the young guys. And I think that's one of the things I love more than anything else is to watch those guys work with a lot of the young people. Colton Parayko is another one that I can recall from a defensive standpoint that can spend a lot of time out on that ice. He's another one that just, he's a hockey nut. He don't want to get off the ice. It's hard to get him off the ice a lot of times.
I meant no disrespect to Pietrangelo, and I was going at the work ethic and that, because
there's no doubt.
But translate in the early games, in the early games you started seeing O'Reilly was the guy working, O'Reilly was the guy working, and when that February 7th game comes around, or January 7th game comes around, or February 7th January 7th against Philadelphia. The Philadelphia game, right? The Philadelphia shutout. Yeah. That's where you see the team start to believe, that, and then the 1-0 shutout against overtime win against Tampa. To me, that's the game. That is the game that told this team they were something special.
Absolutely. Because they had just beaten Florida 2 days before. And that was actually the father's trip that week. And then they went to Tampa, like you said, and they wind up getting that game-winning goal. Now, remember, after the Blues were before that, that was streak, the franchise record winning streak. But you go back, you mentioned that Florida game, or I'm sorry, the Philadelphia game, which was Bennington's first game. The Blues played really well that whole week. And then that Martin Luther King Day afternoon game, they play the Kings in LA, and they stunk it up. I mean, they were no good that afternoon. And then right before they broke for the All-Star break, they beat Anaheim, and that's what's actually started the winning streak. But as you mentioned, guys, the fact that after that break, Blues started playing, they go down to Florida, and you're right. That was a huge win. Also, think about this. You beat a very, very good Nashville team on back-to-back days. You beat them in St. Louis first, and then that Sunday afternoon, you have a game down in Nashville. Vladdy gets the game-winning goal. That's another, I think, big part of the Blues really on a roll that time.
Yeah, and going to Bridgestone and winning in Nashville is a tough thing to do. That is not a hospitable place for visiting teams and visiting fans, as I learned last year. I went down there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was, I lucky enough, I had a press pass, got some audio for Tom Ackerman the following morning. And it was just that place is, the sound system's cranked up to 11. It's a very loud atmosphere, and it's very unlike, I don't want to say the Blues are tranquil by comparison with their game presentation, but it's just different in Nashville. And it's very pro Predators. In fact, if you have to live within a certain zip codes in Nashville in order to even buy Nashville Predators tickets.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, they restricted.
Because
of course,
the Blues and the Blackhawk fans were eating them up. Remember, there were games before the Predators got really good, that was almost like a home game for the Blues.
Yeah, and then
it was
of
the
course,
same thing for the Blackhawks.
And then of course in Tennessee it's legal to scalp, so of course it's really not that hard to get a ticket to a Predators game if you're from the opposing team through that loophole. But I want to get back to the kind of the captaincy. So of course you talked about Pietrangelo, him growing into that role over the years. I know he caught a lot of flack early on, during his time as captain, because a lot of fans didn't think he was ready, and you can kind of see that, but he did grow into it. And then I had a chance to interview him a couple times after games, and he just had a good presence about him, the presence that you need as a captain. Shen showed me that presence a little bit as well, in times that I've talked to him, and he would have been a good option for a captain in my opinion, especially because he's inked up for so long. But O'Reilly, I thought O'Reilly was the right pick. This is a guy that leads by example, first one in, last one out to the arena, and just a consummate professional. And he seems to have reacquired his love for hockey in St. Louis after leaving Buffalo, which I can't really blame him for being miserable in Buffalo. I mean, let's just face it. If it's not the weather, it's the team itself. But
and you know what? If I can interject for a second,
go ahead.
And that's a shame, because you know what? There are a lot of great fans up in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And it is shameful to see them not. And I know they spent some money here during this crazy little different off season that we had. It's almost an organization, and especially for the fan base that you root for, because consistently the Buffalo Sabres and the Buffalo metro area have the top ratings for not only regional broadcasts for the Sabres each and every year. They have any national broadcast. Buffalo, if they're not the top, they're one of the top. Sometimes they're way better than Chicago, even when Chicago was really rolling there in the early 2010s. That is a super hockey market, and I feel sorry for those fans. But here comes a point in time where you get frustrated, and you get it from a Ryan O'Reilly, unfortunately. And you hate to say it, but you look at the trade, you got to be even more frustrated as a Buffalo Sabre fan,
because they got nothing.
Really, Berglund's gone, Saboka's gone, Tage Thompson is not living up, and you hope maybe the couple of their draft picks that you got something out of a Ryan O'Reilly, who's a MVP of the playoff, Selke Award winner, and now a captain of a team that's maybe a possible Stanley Cup finalist or champion again.
Yeah,
you got to be completely frustrated with it.
Yeah, I mean, as a Blues fan, though, when that trade was announced, I mean, I couldn't believe it, because not only did the Blues get O'Reilly, Doug Armstrong and Jedi mind tricked Botterill into taking Sabotka and Berglund, which, that's what made O'Reilly possible, was getting those contracts off the book. So with O'Reilly, reportedly ascending to the captaincy with his performance the last couple of years, his role on the team, compare that to Tarasenko and his, obviously it's not fair, because his shoulder, keeps getting injured. But is this Ryan O'Reilly's team now?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about it, especially now that he's established in a couple of years. And as Guy pointed out, he'd already established himself early on with the respect of veterans and some of the younger players, or even if you were a new player, you had ultimate respect for just the work ethic alone of Ryan O'Reilly. So yes, I don't think there's any question about it. Now, does Ryan, at least from what I can tell, a little bit seem like one of those vocal guys from a leader standpoint? Maybe he is behind closed doors. I don't know. I could see Braden Shin being that type of vocal guy, a little bit more vocal. But I don't know if Ryan is that vocal lead by example, I guess is how we would term it.
Yeah.
I think that would probably fit Ryan O'Reilly more. But again, I'm not behind closed doors, so I don't know if maybe Ryan speaks up with a loud voice. And sometimes you have quiet leaders. I mean, like we were just talking about Petro. He's more of a mild talking type of guy, but I think his words spoke volumes to a lot of those guys, even the veterans in the locker room. So I think what you have, and I've mentioned this before on the air, is the fact that one of the things that creates the locker room the way it is, and it's not like it was completely bad before, but I think Craig Berube changed a lot of the scope of how things are handled and how guys just respond. And like I've said before, listen, there's something that I don't know. I don't know one of those guys that's on that roster now. Obviously, you got a couple of new people, but I don't know one of those guys that wouldn't walk through 17 brick walls for Craig Berube, because he's no nonsense. He's going to tell it like it is. And sometimes he's going to tell you something that you don't want to hear, but in the end, you appreciate it because you know what? He's not BSing you. He's telling you like it is. And I don't know anybody that doesn't like that in this day and age. And I think that's why those guys will go through those 17 brick walls for Craig Berube, and why they play the way they do is because Craig really kind of molded that whole thing together after, let's face it, taking over a situation that was so disappointing beyond anyone's wild imagination before they turned it around, because there was way too much talent on that team for as bad as they were playing the first 3 months of that season. No doubt.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you on there. We've taken a lot of your time, so I want to ask one last question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I want to get into this season a little bit. You have, and one of the questions I wanted to talk to you, I'll ask you later because we're becoming friends, and I love that. But one of the things that you get right now is you're sitting with Bernie, you're sitting with Jamie, you get to hear all their hockey knowledge. And, I spent 5 minutes with Jamie, and the hockey knowledge just poured into me. With all that knowledge that you have, what are the prospects for the Blues this season?
I think they should be very good. But there are more factors still as we sit here today. We're all pumped up because hockey's coming back. I'm so pumped up, like everybody else, for many reasons. Going back to work is kind of nice too. But it depends on circumstances as far as the COVID thing. If the Blues have a breakout on their team, how effective could that be? But on paper, as I see it, I think this team should be right there in the mix. I mean, they've got a battle. Vegas is really, really good. And obviously they've improved with Alex. I think Colorado is really good. I mean, they have more than just the McKinnon line now, as we saw last year. Their problem was their health when you think about it. So I think those are two huge hurdles. You get past those hurdles, you might be looking at Stanley Cup Finals, but those are going to be true battles for this hockey team. But it's really hard to completely prognosticate what's going to happen just from the simple fact of this different time. Any team will tell you, and I'll back up for a second. Right before we started the baseball season, I just by happenstance ran into former Cardinal pitcher Andy Bennis. I was picking up some dinner one night somewhere around my house here in St. Louis, and Andy was there with his family. They were picking stuff up, and we were talking about baseball and everything. And he said, "Scotty," he said, "Look, when I was playing in San Diego, we didn't have that many fans. We had like 8,000 fans in the stands." And he goes, "But I can't imagine running out on the field, getting ready to pitch a game with nothing." He goes, "That even 8,000 fans will get you motivated." Now, it's my understanding that the Blues more than likely going to have some percentage of fan base into the Enterprise Center, but it's still not the same. And that's what also gets you energized as a player. But I can even say as a broadcaster, I can get energized being at when we're at the Enterprise Center, and Bernie and I are doing our broadcast. So how does that play or have an effect on the team as well? Granted, they all played in bubbles, as we all know, whether it was in Toronto or Edmonton, for however long you played the playoffs and what have you. But with all that being said, I think, again, on paper, they have a very good team. I think the Torrey Krug move is unbelievable. I mean, Army kind of knew, I'm sure, and he'll admit it sometime, and he's sort of mentioned that it looked like it was just not going to happen with Petro. Unfortunately, there were certain guidelines he just couldn't meet in the middle. You were there, but you weren't all the way there. But to come around and to pick up Torrey Krug, and I'm not sitting here saying Torrey Krug is Alex Pietrangelo the second. He's not, but he's a competitor. He's probably a little bit of an upgrade from an offensive standpoint, downgrade defensively, because I think Petro gets overlooked at what he was able to do and still can do as far as a defender is concerned. But I think this Blues team on paper really should be right there in the pickings for a potential championship, or at least challenging for a championship. And I want to add one thing. I'm, as I've mentioned before, I'm blessed to do this job. It is amazing. We have a little green room that sits off to where our studio is at Ballpark Village when we're not in Enterprise Center. When you sit with guys like Bernie Federko and Jamie Rivers, or even sit with a guy like Darren Pang, or from a baseball standpoint where I'm with Al Raboski or Jim Edmonds or Rick Ankiel or Brad Thompson, all these guys see the game so much differently from all of us. I have, in this 5 years doing this, I've learned so much more about hockey and baseball. And I'm a pretty quick learner on things. I play the game only at the high school level, but I watched the games, I observed the games. I did it when I did football broadcasts. But to sit there with, like you mentioned, Jamie or Bernie or Panger, they see a different game, man. And I'm just like a sponge, man, because I love it. I love to sit there and listen and learn the game even more. It's truly amazing. And I feel so blessed to be able to sit there and not only call those guys friends, but coworkers that have taught me so much of the game. It's really, really awesome. And I think if you ask each one of those guys, and Johnny Kelly or Chris Kerber or Joey Vitale, I think they all would probably agree with me and say, Blues still have a shot. They're like I said, like we've all talked about before, they're still in this window. And I still think, barring some unforeseen circumstances, which we're under unforeseen circumstances right now, that, on paper, I think they really should be in the mix to really battle potentially again to maybe make a run at the cup again. That's going to be tough. Again, Vegas and Colorado are very, very good hockey teams.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I think it's a gift that we went to this division, vice the Central. I think that we have the opportunity to really hone our game, especially not just this year, but next season when the division changes and we get Phoenix back in our division. I think the style of play between that, I think it's really going to help. Tom, I'm going to give you time for one last question, and then this man is probably going to beat the crap out of me and never talk to me again. But go ahead, Tom.
He's just happy that the Blues are in the Pacific Division. Mr. Hawaii, of course.
Hey, I have not said a word about that because I understand what it's like. I lived in Japan and had to watch games at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Hockey games were on during my work day. So I know exactly what it's like. So I've kept my mouth shut, even though I'm going.
That was a dramatic reenactment of me at Game 7 after Pat Maroon scored, by the way, just FYI. I guess the only thing I have left for you, and first of all, I appreciate your time, Scott. It's been a great chat, and it's got great insight, from not just a TV personality, but just as a fan as well. And I want to ask you one more thing about your time at KMOX. So you mentioned that you had a chance, you were working in the newsroom, and you had a chance to learn under the very talented wing of Bob Hamilton, who of course, recently passed away. And I never had a chance to work with him. I always wish I could have met him. I just never really could work out. But if there is one thing that you could pass along from your learnings under Bob Hamilton to anyone that's looking to get into broadcasting or just life in general, what would that thing be?
Well, and I'll add to this, and I mean this in all sincerity, is I've learned a lot from Bob, but there are a lot of other people that I learned from. There are people like Fred Bottomer, who who's there when I first started.
Just saw him a few hours ago.
Fred's birthday is the same day as mine. Crazy, I know. There was Joan Boykman, who wound up going over to KTRS when I was at KTRS at one time. I could go up and down a list, not only from a newsroom standpoint, but I will also say guys like Randy Carricker and Mike Kelly, the voice of the Tigers, taught me a lot early in the stages when I started to do a little bit, but they taught me even, they come in, we talk all the time. And real quick story, I mentioned Jack Buck and Bob Costas, guys I looked up to, and they said, oh, this is easy. I wrote for Jack Buck one week. They had him come in and do the sports cast on Thanksgiving week when Bill Wilkerson was out. And Jack didn't know how to get on the computer. He said, you're not doing traffic this week. You're going to write the sportscast for Mr. Buck. Mr. Buck, he's a night owl. He does games at night. So he wasn't used to getting up at 4:30 in the morning. And he was sleepy and tired and all this other stuff. And it was the Friday after Thanksgiving. And I'm sitting there writing his last sportscast. And this $100 bill comes down and it lands on the keyboard. I go, oh, Mr. Buck, you dropped this. He goes, no, I didn't. He goes, that's mine to you for everything you've done for me this week. And I want you to take you and your girlfriend out on me tonight.
Wow.
That's Jack Buck. Okay. Bob Costas. So there was something that happened, and this was like early 90s. And it was something big with baseball. And for the life of me, I can't remember. And here's this guy I looked up to. And John Cooper was the executive producer at the time. He was the Ben Boyd of KMOX Sports back then. And Coop's like, hey, Scotty, he goes, are you slow tonight? I'm like, yeah, we have nothing going on. He goes, can you help me out? Bob Costas is coming in and he wants to listen to this thing. Now, Bob has photographic memory. He sees it. He sees it. He hears it. It's just like that. It's amazing. So Bob, Scott, pleasure to meet you. Mr. Costas, nope, it's Bob. Bob, great to meet you. How are you doing? Okay, so I take him in this room. I said, tell me when you want to stop. We're using old reel-to-reel machines, by the way, back then, Tom. And the next year, because that was when I interned in 1990, and 91 is when I started working there. And Bob Costas comes in the big glass doors at One Memorial Drive, and I'm sitting there, and Bob Costas goes, Scott, how you doing? I go, how did this man remember who I am? I met him one time. What is this? I'm just some dumb reporter guy. I wasn't even on the air. I was like, wow, that's impressive. That photographic memory right there was like, holy cow. But what I tell young people who want to get into the business is more than anything else, because again, things have drastically changed, not only within the last 2 years, even this year, but in the last 30 years, it's so different. But if you want to get out ahead, don't let anybody ever outwork you. Don't do it. Do anything and everything that you can. Be multi-talented or be able to do multiple items. You may be focused, like you are, Tom, on sports. I even see the Missouri River Otters banner behind you. That's awesome. But if you do news, that's not a bad thing. If you produce and do news, that's a good thing. And you will show the people, not only the people that you work with, but especially the managers that, Tom, he really works his rear end off. And that, especially in your early stages, is going to catapult you. You're going to get knocked down once or twice, 3 times. This is war of attrition, so to speak. You have to be a survivor to get to where you can be long lasting. I know a lot of talented people that didn't last very long, unfortunately, in this great business, because it's a numbers game. And then they wound up families and they couldn't afford it from a financial standpoint, because it's for the love of the game a lot of the times. But with all that being said, I think hard work is so beneficial for anyone to have any success. And even when you have success, nobody's going to outwork me. I'm going to continue to work. And I was traveling with the Cardinals a couple of years ago, and they were up in Chicago, and it was a Cubs series. And one of my buddies has his daughter who used to go to school up there, and Tim went up there and he's like, hey, can I spend one of the nights up there with you? I'm going to go see my daughter. I said, sure, that's no problem. So we went out to eat. He goes, oh, let's go somewhere else. I go, nah, Tim. I said, I got to, we got a day game. I got to get up early. Oh, come on, Warmann. I'm like, no. I said, I got to go, Tim. So anyway, he gets in. I didn't even hear him. And it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm texting with one of my producers going over items that we're going to do on the pregame show, which is at 12:30 Central Time. Tim goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm working. I said, I'm reading these news stories that I get, the clips. And I said, and I'm looking at stats that we get every morning, and I'm trying to put together. He goes, you're crazy. I go, no, this is what we do. And so there's a lot of people that, in our industry, they think, like one of my closest friends who passed a couple of years ago, he always thought that I just walked in at 6:30 and I did the pregame show. I'm like, no, Scott, because his name was Scott too. I said, no, Scott, that's not how it actually works. But Tim actually saw that we start early in the morning for a day game, but we start early in the morning even for a night game, whether it's the Blues, the Cardinals, whatever. And we try to stack together a show, and we try to put things together, and we read, and we try to become well-versed. And I take pride in that. And I've always said, I appreciate the opportunity, and I love the opportunity that I've been given. And part of that is to put in some hard work. And that, Tom, to me, that's the best advice that I not only can give to you, but, countless of young people that want to get into this business, because eventually your hard work will pay off. It won't be like that, but eventually it does pay off. It really does.
Well, I just got to keep following Guy's example when it comes to the hard work part. I mean, producing videos, climbing Chinaman's hat to give us Blues analysis, and starting his own website. I mean, how can I compete with that?
I'm so, I'm not even close to you guys. I've sat here. I know you guys have seen it. Brett's been like wiped the smile off your face a little bit here and there. It's been an absolute pleasure, Scott, to talk to you, and how open and willingness you have been to talk to me, somebody that you've never met before, but knew about me. So obviously my name's gotten out there. And Tom Franklin, I don't know what I just love you guys. You and Wags have become great friends, and we've never met. And this is one thing that I'm going to say before we leave. In the 2 years that I have really been able to express my Blues fanhood, I have met people that have become closer friends to me that I even haven't met than people I've known my whole life. So this is a great community, and you guys are part of it, and you're the absolute epitome of that community. So thank you so much.
And by the way, Merry Christmas to you guys and to all the great Blues fans out there. We're going to drop the puck here real soon, boys and girls.
That's the best Christmas present of all. And that'll do it for this episode of Blue Notes. I want to thank you for listening, because without you, there is no me, there is no Wags, there is no Hawaii Blues fan, and there is no Hockey Podcast Network. I'm Tom Franklin, reminding you to not be a chump, always play to the whistle, and have a great new year.
A reminder that you can follow Blue Notes on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Blue Notes Pod. I'm the voice of the Blues, Tom Calhoun. Jeremy Boyer, play us out.
You're listening to the Hockey Podcast Network, your home for hockey talk covering every team in the NHL. New episodes every Monday. Download at thehockeypodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from.